During the 1980s, several low-budget films emerged that would be very reminiscent of more well-known films that would hit the silver screen years later. On this month's episode, we will discuss 4 films that would go on to influence later films. 1983's Eyes of Fire, a folk horror tale similar to Robert Eggers' The Witch from 2015. 1984's Soul Survivor, which has the same premise as the original Final Destination film from 2000. 1986's The Vindicator, which has loads of similarities to the sci-fi classic action film Robocop that would hit the screens a year later. And 1986 Witchboard, which has a very similar premise to the horror film Ouija from 2014. Join us this month as we discover these lost gems from the shelves of my dad's video store. Alright, so this month Waylon will not be joining us as he is up to his eyeballs in doing illustrations for clients. As always though, my fellow cinephile Gray Creasy will be joining us. How goes it, Mr. Gray?
Bugs are everywhere. They're dying in my coffee if I leave the cup out on the porch. And it's sweaty times here again. Woo! But
is this those Halloween bugs that you had one time I visited you?
No, those are the Japanese beetles that were having a nice time with you and Sally in the shower when you were over here. Yeah,
it was kind of terrifying. It was a horror movie.
No, these are the proper summer bugs, even though it's not summer yet. Yeah, but no, I got to watch Eyes of Fire and Witchboard, so my world is dandy right now. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, fortunately, we are not going to be alone, though, even though Waylon is not joining us. Joining us is our very first guest of the pod, Mr. Jason Shawhan, who is the senior film critic at the Nashville Scene. Jason, how's it going?
I'm doing all right. I'm fortunate in that I'm not quite having the bug crisis that Gray and AE are. But the thing is, we're generally in the same part of like west of Nashville, which is sort of like the Australia of America. Just because it's like, not everything's trying to kill you, but if it's trying to kill you, this is probably where you're gonna find it. But I'm hanging in there. I'm doing all right.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us this month to discuss these kind of lost gems from the halls of the video store. Could you tell folks out there a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what your day-to-day is like?
Yeah, sure. My general daytime gig, I do front of house stuff for a local nonprofit. I'm a DJ. I'm the senior film critic at the Nashville Scene. I'm a cat sitter. I'm a painter. For some reason, just right out of college, I was just like, I foresaw the gig economy coming, but didn't have the words for it. And I've just been living like that for, the past 20 or so years. But I'm always doing something. I'm always keeping busy. But like, if you ask my avocation, like what I do because I love as well as make money from it, it's be a film critic. It's the best job in the world. It's just there's so few ways to like actually make a living doing just that, though.
Lovely. And you also, you help program like film festivals and also like screenings at local Nashville theaters. Is that correct?
Yeah. I spent many years in the volcanic hell pit of film festival programming. At the Nashville Film Festival. Currently, I'm a consultant on the programming team at the Chattanooga Film Festival, which is a lot of fun, and also still committed to virtual access, which is very rare among film festivals who just sort of like ran to abandon that in the wake of like supposedly the pandemic's over. It's not, but a lot of people are sure acting like let's just put a bunch of people all together in the same room constantly and not provide options.
I hated that. It should have at least gone hybrid, because so many people successfully did the virtual, particularly the Chattanooga Festival, did such a perfect
they were the first.
virtual. Yeah.
CFF was the first film festival to like pivot
wow.
to virtual in
Interesting.
2020. Yeah. It's good stuff. And I'm not just because I'm part of that team. I really do believe in what they're doing.
Well, yeah, and I had a short in the in 2020 at Telluride Horror Show's Virtual Fest, and it was just flawless. It worked so well. They had a virtual lobby, much like Chattanooga did, and it was such a great experience. And then the next year, just gone. And it was like, well, you can do both. You can have a live and a virtual, but nah, nobody did it, except Chattanooga.
Yeah, I feel like they should have the option because, different folks have different needs and whatnot. So, there's a lot of immunocompromised folks out there that probably couldn't venture to a film festival safely at this point. So,
oh yeah,
yeah,
that's definitely part of it. Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times with distributors, it'll be like, oh, we want the launch of an in-person thing, and to like build awareness for a theatrical release. And like I believe in that. I believe in experiencing weirdo cinema in theaters, but I also know the economics of the business right now, and sometimes this festival appearance, it's the most attention you're gonna get. So why not, put that towards a platform where you can get the most eyes on your stuff, in case you don't get to that theatrical release. I don't know. I'm old, I'm jaded, and I just want to sometimes see monsters versus the unsuspecting sexy people, and sometimes there are people who are committed to that and to getting that into theaters, but a lot of times you're just like, this is going to go straight to streaming. I'm glad I got a chance to see this in the theater while I could.
For sure. And do you have a relationship with any of the films that we're discussing this month on the podcast?
I love 3 of them.
I bet I know the one you don't.
I bet you do too.
I bet it's the one I don't.
We'll get into that. We'll save that. We'll save that criticism for the one that you don't like. So, okay, excellent. Well, why don't we dive into our actual show? So, and I just wanted to kind of preface the kind of theme of this episode. We're not implying that these films are like that other films have ripped these films off or anything like that. While there are a lot of similarities between like Eyes of Fire and The Witch and Final Destination and Soul Survivor, etc., they have their own ideas, they have their own identities, but there's just a lot of similarities between them, and these films happen to predate them, and they're just not as well known. All right, well, now that that's out of the way, let's journey back to the dark forest of the New World for Eyes of Fire from 1983.
It was a time of witchcraft, of hangings, of horror, of magic. They were outcasts on a desperate voyage to the promised land. What they found was a terrifying world.
Strange land.
Lost in a forest far from home, in a valley none would enter.
That tree says that this valley is where the lost blood gathers. It's the home of the devil.
The secret is sleeping in the trees. eyes of fire. The secret is sleeping in the trees.
Jason, I know this film is rather near and dear to you, so would you mind synopsizing Eyes of Fire for our listeners?
Well, you won't believe what the Reverend Will Smythe went and did. He's gone and shacked up with a married woman. Granted, it's 1750, and there's not even an organized government structure yet, just a series of colonial settlements by a bunch of Puritans vying for space with hunters on a trapathon, the indigenous population, who honestly could have saved everyone a whole lot of trouble if people just listened, and the French. But what Reverend Will and his renegade band of whoremongers and families will find is an unspeakable nightmare that was ancient when the land itself was new. And who knows how it's all going to shake out. There will be artsy effects, a spectacular swamp witch. I think, honestly, this film has the best swamp witch in cinema history. We've got an animaniac, and a possible answer to the questions, where exactly is the horror sleeping? And did Terrence Malick watch this while he was making The New World?
Yes.
That's Avery Crounse's 1983 Eyes of Fire, which is honestly a great film, and also great depending on either of the versions you watch. The recent restoration that Severin Media did for the all the Haunts Be Ours folk horror box set, they went in and they got the original negative from the director Avery Crounse, who's sadly no longer with us. And they did a beautiful restoration of that, and also of his first cut of the film, Crying Blue Sky, which is 22 minutes longer. Most of it is right at the beginning, and it's more stuff. And you get to see how the community of Puritans works before it all gets torn apart by adultery and swamp witches. And it's like, they're both great. It doesn't, the director's cut, if we want to call it that, it doesn't replace Eyes of Fire, it complements it.
Great. Well, excellent synopsis. Fantastic. All right, well, Gray, I know you kind of have a real affinity for this film, and you've been chomping at the bit to talk about it ever since we launched this podcast. So, here's your chance. What do you think of Eyes of Fire?
Yeah, I believe when you and me and Waylon were just even discussing the concept of this podcast, I think that was one of my first recommendations. This movie, from the time I was 8 or 9 years old, has been with me. From the first time I walked into movies to go and saw the box art, because I would sneak into the little horror section when I was a kid, and the box art was not the one that's now on the Severin packaging, which is the beautiful tree with the eyes and the butterfly wing, the red butterfly wings. It was the girl floating with the sort of skeletal tree limbs reaching out to her. From that moment, it's
amazing poster. That's such good box art.
Burned in my mind ever since, you know, and that was with me for a couple of years until I rented it when I was 12, multiple times when I was 12. And it was my introduction to folk horror, before that was even a popular term, at least in this country. Got in me and never left. And what is so fascinating about it is this was a unique and entirely American version of this genre. It was before I'd seen and loved the classics. It was before Wicker Man, before Witchfinder General or Blood on Satan's Claw. So my introduction was Eyes of Fire. And everything from, you know, it has this sensibility that the evil is part of the woods. It is the woods. It's an entirely natural thing. It's not outside of humanity or nature. It is nature, which is really unique, or at least it was, you know, in 1982 to this genre of movie. And, you know, just the dichotomy of, like, Reverend Smythe versus Marion, the all-American fur trapper who's, you know, sort of down to earth, and, like, their dichotomy is very unique to this movie as opposed to, like, the British UK folk horror. It's just, it has this energy and this feel that's just so unique to what it is. And then, of course, you know, like Jason was saying, the absolute hallucinatory special effects, all done in camera, and this had to have had a massive influence on my, you know, interest in practical effects going forward. Just the trees and as he said, it is the greatest Witch of the Woods that has ever been committed to. It's just phenomenal. The Queen of the Woods versus the Witch of the Woods battle at the end is still one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Everything about it, it's like in my DNA from 12 years old on. It makes me giddy every time I watch it. All the complaints about it that most people have about it, to me, are strengths. So, I can't say enough good about Eyes of Fire.
Well, amazing. It seems like it means a lot to you. Jason, when did you first see Eyes of Fire, and what are your thoughts on the film?
I was a firm patron of the video store when I was a kid, but I also was a satellite dish kid. Like, I would look through this, like, monstrous tome of a OnSat magazine every month and just make a note of, like, well, that sounds interesting. That's something with you. And I was the, in an archetype that was very prevalent in the 1980s, but not so much anymore. I was the technology person in the house. So, like, Lil Me had to, like if my mom wanted to watch something, or one of my grandparents was like, I want to see this, I had to, like, make sure that everything was set up for them, so they just had to turn the TV on and it would be there. So I was able to use that to my advantage, probably to see quite a few things I might not should have at that point, but Eyes of Fire, I know, was just sort of like, like phrases like, period piece and swamp witch. These are things that I'm, like, programmed to respond to. And I feel like I just saw it at one point and probably taped it off of there. And then later on, when this would have been in the 90s when I was off in college, I was just like, hey, have any of y'all seen Eyes of Fire? And nobody knew what it was. So I was just like, okay, I got to track this down. And so then, that was the first of, like, buying VHS tapes for things that, were readily available at the time, but then all of a sudden weren't available in any capacity. Because for the longest time, the highest, like, resolution that this film had was Laserdisc. I have it over there in my cabinet. And it has that incredible key art from the VHS release.
Nice.
But, so yeah, I tracked it down and I would show it to people. I was sort of an evangelist for this film for a while. When the Blair Witch Project came out, when, you could still communicate directly via the websites, I told Myrick and Sanchez, I was just like, if you haven't seen Eyes of Fire, you should totally check it out, because it's having a conversation with your film in a really interesting way.
Yeah.
About, like, genuinely American horrors.
Yeah.
And so and that was cool. That was just, like, that was the beauty of the internet in 1999. And then also I had the opportunity, we every year in Nashville we do a thing called 12 Hours of Terror. And Gray and A helped design our, like, haunted lobby for it. It's 7 films, 10 p.m. Saturday night to 10 a.m. Sunday morning. And the first year we did it, I was just like, I want to show Eyes of Fire. And everyone else on the team was just like, the what now? And, like, Jim Ridley had seen it once in the past, but didn't remember it too well. And I was just like, no, let's see if it's showable. And we tracked down a print, and this print was immaculate. It had probably been run through a projector, like,
Hardly
maybe
shown.
Yeah, like maybe 3 or 4 times. And so, like, we showed that. Everyone was just like, what the hell was that? Then you'd hear like from Phil Blankenship at the New Beverly in LA, and, like, you'd hear from all the people doing interesting repertory stuff. It was just sort of like it came up. And, some of it in, like, the year before we did it, and some of it in the year after, but there was, like, a 2 or 3 year period when this film was, like, the rediscovery, and it was wonderful just watching that happening, across, like, the national repertory cinema scene. But, like, the thing about, like, horror audiences and genre audiences is that they're always looking for something new and interesting, or something classic that deserves the love that it has not been giving. And I'm very glad that this film got that sort of turnaround in reassessment and awareness before Avery Krauts died. Because, I mean, like, that had to be vindicating for, you put your life's work into this film, and then, nobody knows because of video deals and whatever, and then you just sort of do your own thing for a while, and then finally just like, oh, this actually meant a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love this movie.
Yeah, well, fantastic. I don't think I had quite the relationship with this film that both of you had. I'd certainly seen it, like I saw a lot of these, in my dad's video store. But it kind of, I don't know, it didn't quite strike me as it does now. I find it actually much more interesting as an adult. I think I saw it when I was like 9 or something, probably too young to really fully appreciate it. After The Witch, I immediately kind of thought of this movie. Like, I remember this movie when that came out, I was like, that is a lot like Eyes of Fire. Seeing this now again after having seen The Witch, and I did actually take the time to rewatch The Witch as well. And there are a lot of similarities. There's a lot of differences as well. Obviously in The Witch, it's like a family being driven out of their community. But in this film, it's a family and basically all the followers of this priest who are being driven out of their community, and then they find a new home out in the woods, and there's an ancient evil out there. And I mean, it's very similar. I mean, I could basically say that for The Witch as well.
But of course, in this one, they actually leave of their own accord and lock the town in a barn because the town realizes that Leah has some serious power. That's actually a weird little difference between the two, and they steal all their shit and like leave on their own.
The town elders are just like, look, we can countenance having a sorceress, or we can countenance adultery, but we cannot countenance both of them. Something's got to be
at the same
time.
Can't have both. Pick one. So, yeah, but it is interesting though. I didn't know the term colonial horror before I kind of dove into researching this. I'd never heard that term, but it's interesting. I guess like the first folk horror that's American based for me, I guess would technically be Sleepy Hollow, which I wouldn't even normally think, but yeah, I guess it is. It's kind of a folk horror for America. So I always think of the Disney cartoon classic. So I guess that was my first American folk horror. And honestly, I saw this before like you, Gray, before Wicker Man, before Blood on Satan's Claw and all that. So yeah, this was early. This was an early kind of folk horror film for me, for sure.
I'll say at the same time I was discovering Eyes of Fire because of the satellite dish, I also discovered another American folk horror. Do either of y'all remember Spellbinder?
No.
It's basically the same plot structure as The Wicker Man, but it's in like sexy, artsy LA in like 1987.
Oh,
okay,
wow.
I'm tracking this down.
Yeah, it's pretty great. It's like it's exactly what you would expect it is, and like by like saying it's like The Wicker Man, I'm kind of giving things away about it, but it's like that is a foundation that you can build a lot of things on. Like that's a reliable, like the horror of trespass, even when you're invited. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there. Ooh. And also the other thing about Eyes of Fire that I think is so neat is that you've basically got 4 different religious perspectives battling it out, but it's never really addressed in those terms. It's like, you've got like Will's Protestantarianism, like whatever he's preaching at the time. You've got the Catholic French soldiers in the Eyes of Fire cut. In the other, they're actually directly Catholic Church officials. You've got whatever the sort of matriarchal witch force that Leah represents, and then oh God, what's the other? Oh, and then you have the native characters. So you've literally got 4 different cosmologies all occupying this space. And again, it's a literal illustration of the Tower of Babel. If everybody could talk to everybody, they probably would have solved some problems without, the murder and the thing about this movie that I genuinely love is that like the like art school minions of the Swamp Witch, like the way they move, the way they like dissolve into trees and stuff, but also the fact that when you shoot at them, they explode like a mining encampment. It's just like a kaboom. You're just like, whoa.
Yes.
I actually kind of laughed a bit when they exploded. It was like a giant explosion.
No, it's ridiculous, but it needs to be ridiculous because it's like you have to impress people who like, oh, the devil spoke to so and so, and like, goody bad wife's gone and done it again. It's you have to have something that they do not have the words for, and
but I think it might have been the first time that I really cognizantly remember the massive explosion and then the reverse, and then the explosion reversing itself back to complete still frame, which has been done a million times since. But in 1982, I don't know how many times that had been done as that effect for like
Yeah.
weirdness, you know. Yeah.
I always think of The Fog, like when the fog is retreating in John Carpenter's The Fog, and I remember he had to like give direction to Adrienne Barbeau, like on top of the lighthouse, like, hey, you can't blink because we're gonna run all this backwards, so like the blinking will look super weird. But yeah, I love the smoke on the tree, like as that's like running backwards, it's like the dry ice kind of there and stuff. There was a lot of like cool, like kind of just simple post-production effects.
Oh yeah, and using that to effect, particularly when little Meg is taken, and that whole sequence. Wow, because you know, I've read people, they talk about the issues of pacing in this movie, and I think this movie is wonderfully paced. I will fight anybody on that. Particularly that sequence, when little Meg, that whole sequence is. Particularly that scene is really scary where she's called and she runs out to the tree and there's that wonderful reverse smoke effect and she vanishes into the tree. Then they find her hanging upside down and Sister, who is having these horrifying visions, sees her with her face all hacked up. And it just, from that point on, we have like 15 minutes of like horrifying action-oriented horror level shit. It's like, I was like, holy God. And it's like, is this the end of the movie? No, there's another like 30 minutes left, but yeah, that's like,
it's a horrific acid trip.
It really is.
And
it
is very psychedelic in its visual presentation. I mean, from like using sort of like the negative film imagery, like interweaving that to the backwards motion to just kind of, the way like, you know, dead colonists and stuff like appear and disappear and the natives show up. It's very surreal, but in a very like, you know, sort of psychedelic manner.
I love the fact that the beautiful tree of white flowers is like the most unspeakable warning. They're just like, oh, it's so beautiful and tranquil and pretty, and they're like, this is a giant neon sign saying no,
no, leave now.
Yeah. Well,
I love that.
Oh. Plus, the tablet tells them, like, hey, this, you know, like, don't camp here.
We found this carved on some stone in the river.
Well, this seems like a good place to set up.
Yeah. But that's the thing about, like, the thing that I relate to about Reverend Will more than anything is not just, like, you know, like, indulging in the pleasures of the flesh, but also, like, recognizing when providence and laziness kind of dovetail and work real nice together.
Exactly, because I love the multiple scenes of Will not working.
Yeah.
While everyone else is hauling stuff and tilling the fields, and he's just walking along with the little child. And it's like, Will, you got this figured out, don't you?
And I'll say again, like, if you seek this film out, the Blu-ray has both cuts, and it's very interesting to watch Crying Blue Sky because the trippier effects are much more towards the second half of the film, and it's like a gradual thing to where it builds up to like full tilt boogie. Whereas with In Eyes of Fire, it's from the beginning. We've got the crazy shit happening, and it's just interesting to see the cumulative effect of that weirdness. So yeah, and you know, I'm in the bag for this film, but I'm in the bag for both versions of this film.
Well, and it's a slower process of Reverend Smythe sort of losing his mind, also, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the longer cut too, he's not. Yeah,
it's good stuff. And again, it's instead of the French soldiers that are the framing device, it's the church. Mm-hmm. Because yes, children, you're much safer with the church than with the French. It's good stuff. It's a fun comparison.
We mentioned director Avery Krauss, which this was his first film, but like he didn't really do a lot after this.
The Invisible Kid.
Completely different. Yeah, he did The Invisible Kid, like a kid's film in the late 80s, and then one other drama, like I think close to the aughts, and that was it. And I've never seen either of those other films. But I just find it so interesting that this film, which was like right out of the gate for him, is so interesting. And yet, I guess it was, I think you're saying, Jason, that it was like not very well received, but at the time. But yeah, it's kind of a shame because I think like Avery could have had a really great career in like the horror genre.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this was such a unique horror film for its time, and it was quite a bit ahead of its time as well.
I think Eyes of Fire was so good because I don't know if you know this, but he was a photographer first. And if you look him up, his photography is brilliant. Like, you understand why Eyes of Fire is so visually sumptuous and amazing. His photography is incredible. You can look him up online, and it's like, oh yeah, of course. Of course this movie looks like this. I don't know if this is the movie he had in him, and...
Yeah, and then he went back to his photography career,
Yeah, I don't know.
Apparently.
There are interviews with him on the Blu-ray, which I have not watched because, I felt bad about, like, watching interviews, like, right when someone dies. I don't know. It's just a weird... I do need to get around to doing that, but, also to not be a one and done. Like, this film has the scope and vision of a one and done, but, like, no, like, he made other stuff. It's just, like, this... Like, I wonder if, like, he just put everything into this, and it was just sort of like, you know, when you put everything into your first film, what's the next step?
Right.
Also...
Yeah, it's pretty exhausting.
Yeah.
And probably disheartening as well, in a way.
Oh,
So-
I'm sure. I really want to point out how much Dennis Lipscomb in this film looks like a fey Michael Ironside.
You are not wrong.
No, you are not wrong at all.
You'll never not be able to see that again.
Thank
I'm
you for
sorry.
that.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes.
Oh, and yes, Jason, of course, while we're on that, you must know that 3 cast members went on to Brian De Palma's body double.
Yeah,
Oh, that's right.
that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and Krauntz's response when they brought that up was like, well, I guess De Palma must have seen this movie. He goes,
That's the thing. Like, De Palma likes good film, and this is good film.
Mm-hmm.
And this, if especially, like, every director has at least one friend who is, like, in the genre cinema world that, like, is just like, hey, if something comes along that I need to see, let me know. And Eyes of Fire is such a singular achievement in, like, American independent cinema of the early 80s that it's just like, yeah, if you're paying attention to things, you're going to see that. And I firmly believe this. I don't have inside information that confirms this, but, like, when you watch Eyes of Fire, you're just like, Terrence Malick had to have been aware of this because it's like there's so few films set in that time period anyway. Mm-hmm. And there are moments that, and just like, yes, I want to see Terrence Malick do a Swamp Witch film. I'm putting that out into the ether. Because, come on, who doesn't want to see that? But,
It's funny you're mentioning Terrence Malick because the entire time I was watching Eyes of Fire, the VO kept reminding me of Days of Heaven.
yeah.
It just really rung into my head. I was like, oh, that's so like Days of Heaven, and even like the timbre of it and like the way she speaks.
Actually, I did want to bring up the VO, the little girl's VO. It's actually really well written, and it's often really funny, and I liked it a lot. And you know, voiceovers are often really tricky, and they sometimes really undercut a movie. But this time, I thought it really worked. It was really charming, and particularly when we're seeing Leah's sort of slow evolution into the Queen of the Woods, where it goes from her eating dirt. You know, it starts off creepy, and we don't know if we can trust Leah or not. Then it sort of moves into her eating dirt, and then there's that scene in the rain where she ends up hugging the little girls, and then they end up under the rain barrel, and there's the rainbow coming down to the rain barrel, and with that sweet voiceover, it's all really wholesome and lovely. There's this, and beautifully shot. I just love that moment so much. And a lot of that is the voiceover. And I was really rewatching it again. I was like, wow, that actually works. And it's very sweet. It makes you really love Leah and at that moment. And you're like, oh, we can trust her, as wild and feral as she's been before.
Any parting thoughts about Eyes of Fire before we move on to our next film?
See it. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. It is...
For sure. Definitely seek this out.
Exactly. Same thing. It's a very important movie. And I will say the last shot in the, the shorter theatrical version of the French soldier where his eyes turn into the witch eyes is almost unforgivable. But the rest of the movie is so amazing, I'll forgive it. I'll allow it.
If only it had actually gotten like a gut bucket sequel where it's just like the swamp witch is amongst the French. What's going to happen to us?
Yes.
It's always interesting when like the really artsy horror films spawn the mercenary sequels, like, or vice versa. I'm a fan of that.
Yes.
Somebody should do a folk horror themed out in the woods, like haunted house, and include the swamp witch, I think, in there. I think that'd be great. So,
Well, I got the property.
I was just thinking, Gray. I was like a little October project for you. So, all right. Well, if you're interested in watching Eyes of Fire, it is streaming on Shudder and AMC Plus. If you would prefer a physical copy, Severin has an amazing Blu-ray available. All right, from witches in the woods to a haunted survivor of a plane crash, it's time to discuss Soul Survivor.
Somewhere between the dimension of life and death.
How many made it?
Just you, I'm afraid.
This is Con 86. We have a light.
Say again?
Somewhere between the unexpected and the unexplained are the forces beyond human understanding.
I feel like I'm about to be caught.
Something beyond life is watching her, stalking her, and now is coming to get her.
No one can stop it, Denise.
The harmony of nature has been disrupted.
But if you tell them what you know...
The laws of existence have been violated.
I've never seen anything like it.
The retribution of tormented souls is about to be unleashed. Soul Survivor. It will never rest alone.
All right, so Gray, can you synopsize Soul Survivor for our listeners out there?
Soul Survivor concerns TV commercial producer Denise Watson, who emerges at the start of the film as the only survivor of a passenger airline crash. We discover this via the creepy, gory, hallucinatory fever dream of an aging actress with psychic visions named Carla Davis, who is supposed to star in one of Denise's upcoming coffee commercials. Carla desperately tries to warn Denise's studio that she shouldn't board that plane, but Denise does, and she becomes our Soul Survivor. An initially and peculiarly upbeat Denise confides and falls in love with David, the doctor who treats her post-crash, and David is convinced that she's experiencing survivor's syndrome. These experiences escalate in the form of night terrors and visions of strange, mysterious people haunting her day and night. Denise comes to believe that she has escaped fate by surviving the plane crash, and that death is coming for her to correct those cosmic scales. Once it becomes more and more undeniable that these mysterious figures she's seeing are in fact walking, murderous corpses of the recently deceased and not figments of her survivor's guilt, even Dr. David and the local pathologist have a hard time disbelieving Denise's theory. Spookiness ensues as Denise tries to figure out how to stop the chain of death that inexorably leads back to her.
All right, nicely done, excellent synopsis. All right, Jason, what were some of your thoughts on Soul Survivor? Had you seen this film before?
Yeah, this movie's a masterpiece. This is another one that we had at our 12 Hours of Terror.
Nice.
I found my way to it because of Night of the Comet. Like, the writer-director Tom Eberhardt, later that same year did Night of the Comet, which is just like, that's an all-time banger. And I was just like, well, let's see what other things he's made. And then to watch this, like, I think I saw this for the first time in the very early aughts, so it was like right at the upswing of the Final Destination series, and I was just like, oh, this is something very special, because like thematically it's very much in the same milieu as the Final Destination films, but it's like it's completely different visual grammar, it's a completely different kind of story, and it's like you can understand why seeing this you just be like, okay, let's take this central idea and like make it a little bit more Rube Goldberg-y and fun. But, like, it's just, yeah, it's so great. Like, Soul Survivor is so good. This is absolutely a movie that got rated R for adult themes. Like, you know, there's some nudity in there, and there's some, like, violence, but it's like, when something is rated R for adult themes, and you're just like, well, what does that even mean when you're growing up? And then the joke of adult themes is the way that you grow to understand what adult themes are, it happens as you become an actual adult. So it's just, like, it's not something you can, like... It's just like you look at this film and it's just like, oh, it's about, you know, feeling lonely and not being able to make a relationship work, and like there's like these are concepts, you can explain them to kids, but they're not gonna get it. It's like, and once you get these kinds of themes, you're just like, oh shit, I grew up, damn.
That horrible realization.
Yeah.
Gray, what did you think of Soul Survivor? Had you seen this one before as well, or?
I actually had not. I must have missed that 12 Hours of Terror. Mm-hmm. And oddly, I didn't even know this movie existed. And I'm a huge Night of the Comet fan. We watch it well nigh every year. And I didn't even realize Tom Eberhardt was the same director until I watched this movie for the podcast. So, wow, okay. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. A and I both watched it together, and, you know, we were like, what a gem that we somehow slept on and just didn't even know about. But, you know, there's only so many hours in the day and years in a lifetime. So from the moment the movie begins, in the empty town and the mannequins and the Carnival of Souls feel, we were like, oh, yeah, we're in. Like... This movie is going to have to try so hard to lose us after that opening scene that, and it didn't. And that was such a great, like, we knew we were seeing a scene from later in the movie. And you know, when you get a great hook opening like that, you can't wait to see how it's all going to tie in later. And it did perfectly. To that 38 gun, seeing it later in the glove box of the taxi cab drivers, I was like, it's such a good pay. This is so well structured. It was just wonderful. Just the spooky mood, and then, you know, obviously I'd already seen Final Destination, and, you know, It Follows. That's the one that people don't bring up as much about this movie. It's just as much It Follows as it is Final Destination.
Yeah, I thought the same as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Vibes.
But one thing I really loved is that it wasn't ghosts. It was literal corpses.
Yeah.
Every time any recently dead corpse she got near would get up and fucking come for her. I was like, how interesting to make it not really a zombie. It was like a ghost zombie movie. It was, and it was just so unique. I haven't seen that before in like a ghost story where they combined the two. There were so many great genre mashups that became entirely unique. Just really, really fascinating. I really liked and they also added in the plausibility. I really loved the pathologist character. Really loved that detail of him noticing that the corpses all had the blood drained down to their legs after they'd been brought in, after they were dead. And he's like, wait a minute, that's not possible. After the time of death, they all had the blood at the butt, like they'd gotten up and walked around after they had died. I'm like, that's so good, especially for a movie this early in like the sort of zombie movie timeline. I'm like, that's just beautiful. And I guess it's not a lost gem. I guess people know it's a lost gem to me. And so I was just utterly thrilled that you put this on the list.
I think it is a bit of a lost gem. It's a little bit hard to come by, especially in the States. But yeah, it's interesting. My relationship with this film is I saw it pretty young. I saw it when I was like 8 or 9. It scared the shit out of me. This movie was terrifying when I was a little kid. The tone, the creepy dead people coming after her and watching her from a distance. This movie spooked the shit out of me. And for the longest time, I was like telling people about it. I was like, one of the movies that there are 2 movies that scared me more than any other films when I was a little kid. This was one of them. The other one was this movie called The Sentinel from the late 70s. Oh, yeah. That movie absolutely terrified the shit out of me. There are moments in that movie that are so creepy and so disturbing. And actually rewatching it as I got older, I bought a copy of it and I was like, holy fuck, I should not have seen this when I was a kid. But yeah, Soul Survivor, is great, and how similar it is to Final Destination. I think even the Final Destination people acknowledge this film as an influence on it. But it's interesting, yeah. Tom Eberhardt cites Carnival of Souls, which is also a favorite film of mine. So, like, that kind of horror kind of feel, that sort of atmosphere, mood, like creepy people watching you from a distance, that kind of thing, that is my jam. I love that so much. And I particularly really like this film even more now as like an independent filmmaker, because I was reading up about them making this film, and they shot it in the Orange County with no permits. They got like the hallway in the hospital like for free. They were like, hey, we don't use this one hallway. You guys can shoot down there. So they got all this production value from just like basically calling in favors. Half of the cast, not the main actors, but a lot of the other people in the film, they're just friends of the producers and the director. Like the car, that Trans Am that her neighbor drives her home in, that's the director's car. So it has that real indie film kind of like chutzpah about it, and I absolutely love it. The strip poker scene is really great and really random, and I guess the actress that plays Christy, she's a scream queen. Like, I had looked her up, I was like, oh my gosh, she's been in like 400 some odd movies or something. It was like, but she had done Slumber Party Massacre, the original one, right before this. So then after that, yeah, she really just got completely involved in horror film. We talked about Tom Eberhardt, really brilliant. He also directed Without a Clue. Which is another movie that I am always telling people about, and it's another one that's been lost. I don't know why that one's been lost. It has Michael Caine and Ben Kingsley in it, and it's uproariously funny, or at least it was back in the 80s when it came out. I understood, though, that the distributor really screwed the producers and all the actors and stuff on this film. This film actually made a ton of money and did really well. But they always used some creative accounting to always show that they were just a little bit still in the red, and they never paid out any residuals or anything. And because of that, the actress that plays Dee Dee, that's why she only did 2 films. She did one other film before this, and then she did this film, and then she got out of the business because it was such a bad experience for her that she wouldn't get any of this back-end money, and she knew damn well that they were hanging on to it and stuff. So... yeah, love everything about this. Really love how they effectively did a plane crash in this movie at the beginning. They do it very simply. They show like a shot of the plane, taking off from the runway, which is a beautiful shot. And then they just show like the air traffic controller and the screen that the air traffic controller is looking on, and then they show the aftermath of the crash, and it's just some wreckages and some bodies.
It's that great tracking
just
shot,
sitting in the chair. Yes, it's amazing, and it's an inexpensive way to do something very big.
And that tracking shot of the aftermath, since it's Carla Davis's essentially fever dream of, it's allowed to be, it's extremely arty and terrifying and very it's like the only gory scene in the movie. There's a guy cut in half, and like it's really scary, and then it ends on Denise still strapped to the seat. Basically, like the first thing we see after the spooky opening. I mean, it just opens the movie like, yeah, it's really fantastic.
It's a great hook. It's a fantastic hook. It hooks you right in and really doesn't ever let go, I don't think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the creepy whispers that are going on with, man, it's so good. Like, they were able to get like pretty good sound designers to work on this, and just once again through favors. And I think it really kind of helps to elevate the film and beyond that. But the script is really smart. And back to the similarities between Final Destination and this, I couldn't help but think of the psychic Carla as sort of like a precursor to the Tony Todd character and stuff. But it's interesting, there's also this mortician character in this film, and then they make Tony Todd the mortician in Final Destination to kind of like fill in that. So it's interesting too, because there is a gag early on in this when she sees the little girl that's dripping with water. It's the first time the dead kind of come after her after she gets out of the hospital. And the van starts to like head towards her, and she quickly moves out of the way. And it's like that little moment is like the seed that grew the Final Destination franchise.
Yeah.
Like that's it, because they went with a totally different way, but they do that at the very beginning, and I'm sure that the Final Destination producers are like, let's do that. Let's do all these crazy setups to have death mysteriously look like an accident or something to kill people. But
right, because the rest of the time in Soul Survivor, it's the actual dead people that are killing people or going after her. It's not, they're not affecting something else. But in that one scene, it's the van, right? Which is what Final Destination went with. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I had a couple other random thoughts about this. I love the fact that she's a producer and her gig is being completely derailed by a cruel universe. It's like, it's not just the fact that the dead are after her. They're literally like taking away control from a producer, which is just like, there's some subtle critique of the industry going on there. I think. I would pay a stupid amount of money for a coffee mug from the commercial. The design of the coffee mug, spectacular.
So great.
I love that sort of thing. Also, as when we were talking about films that, like, with the Carnival of Souls vibe you can see in this, there's also, and part of it is just the fact that this film is everywhere now, thankfully, but there's some serious Messiah of Evil vibes, like, lurking in here, too. Especially, like, when it comes to California horror. Like, it does that very well. I love the fact that this is a Christmas movie.
It is.
Yep.
Like, when was the last time that you hung out at a party or a place with a sweet reel-to-reel setup? Like, not a musician's house where they use it for, like, recording things, but just for playback? Like, that was the thing. I was just like, when was the last time I was at a reel-to-reel party?
Playing Christmas music, yeah.
And I love...
Even before our time.
Yeah. I love this movie's turtleneck game. This movie has more turtlenecks than, like, most films, and they're all of them really interesting. It doesn't feel lazy. It feels like a specific mood that they're going with, and this movie is all about mood. But the last thought that I have on this, and it's just the wonderful scene where, like, you know, Dee Dee goes to to Christy, the next door neighbor, and is just like, I'm freaking out. Can I crash here tonight? And she's just like, sure, just let me get my teen party out of the way. But seeing that, I was just like, it makes me respect so much the way that women can be real with one another. And other than Elm Street 2, has there ever been a movie where dudes could just say to each other, man, there's some supernaturalness going on in my life. Can I crash here tonight? Like, that's a scene we need more of.
Absolutely.
Also, I love that they kick the guy out into the rain without his shoes.
Yep.
I was like, and just because her friend came over, her neighbor came over, I was like, that's like hilarious.
And Denise is just like, look, I'm hip. I understand what's going on. Can I please just have some painkillers and liquor?
Yeah.
Like, Denise is just like,
and I know that
your teen parties mean nothing to me other than I feel
Denise
old.
is like, look, I'm a high-powered producer. That's why I don't have any other friends than my teenage neighbor that's having a strip party. So I need to come over here and get some Quaaludes and some booze and get the guy who is Jacques Renault's brother from Twin Peaks out of here. Sorry, that was it was bugging me the whole time. I was like, who is that guy?
Oh my gosh, I didn't even notice that. I did not even notice that. Wow. Nice.
But Jason, like you were saying, the universe being against her as a producer and the movie being a Christmas movie, they combine in the fact that she's shooting in this weird, decrepit, like, former CAA building, like where they're shooting the coffee commercial. It's the most decrepit, weird, like, brutalism building. But at the same time, there's, like, auditions for Santa Clauses happening, and, like, tap dance lessons happening in the background. You can hear people tap dancing, and by the elevators, people are bringing babies in Santa outfits up to audition to be Santa. It's the most uproarious shit.
Those little touches, they're amazing. They're like cherries on the top of a fantastic sundae.
Yes.
They're just like, they really add a whole other dimension. It's like a tiny bit of levity, like the Santa's coming in after a really scary scene.
Yeah, it's a very scary, moody movie, and then there's these weird little, very funny moments hiding in the wings.
future Tom Eberhardt, we're going to get to see more of his sense of humor and stuff in his later films. I think he also wrote Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. I think
he did.
Also wrote that as well. So
he did.
Yeah, he's had quite the career. Any other kind of parting thoughts about Soul Survivor before we move on?
I did a little bit of research. There was briefly a Blu-ray for it in the U.S. from Scorpion, which is sort of like it's in receivership or something, but like a lot of their inventory got bought by Grindhouse Video in Knoxville, and they don't have the Blu-ray, but they've got the DVD, and there enough copies that it doesn't say like only like 3 left or something. So if you really, really want a U.S. media friendly version of this film, you can get it on DVD from Grindhouse Video.
Nice. It's also streaming on Shudder and AMC Plus as well, if people want to check it out there.
But I feel like it will turn up on Blu-ray or 4K in the US at some point in the future. I feel like all of the Scorpion titles, there are other companies who are just like, what can we do with this? So I'm all for that, Like it's such a weird world where we're getting like 4Ks of like beloved, almost forgotten 80s things, and like the big ticket things, we can't even get Blu-rays of those from the studios. It's insanity. I mean, I just I opened a 4K of The Devil's Honey today, and that's a better world than we deserve when that movie's getting a 4K.
It is. Again, it's just a gem, and I'm glad I now know about it. Also, AE and I have decided that there should be a spin-off movie that's just about the psychic actress Carla Davis. She needs her own movie.
Yes.
She should just be a character that pops up in other horror films to warn them.
Well, and it's also it's great the way that we start the movie with her. And she calls the agent guy, and he's just like, oh, she's doing her late night phone calls again, just like, so obviously the big thing in the film industry in 1982 when they're shooting this or whatever is that like, oh yeah, like there's an occasionally bluesy character actress, but like she does have these psychic visions and they tend to be correct, so you just have to deal with that as like a casting director.
Yeah. Well, from the dead returning to claim the one who escaped them to a cyborg hell-bent on revenge, it's time for The Vindicator. Jason, can you please synopsize The Vindicator for folks out there?
Yeah. Something's going on at the aerospace lab, where the scientists smoke during experimental trials, and no one is capable of concealing their true nature. And even the act of love can be delayed or obeyed if the call of science comes through. The quests for money and power are derailing whatever noble aims might have once been in place, and an accident, for all intents and purposes, kills our main character, who wears what Hawaiian shirts would be if the color palette was that of Big Tree Records from the 70s, which you might recognize if your parents were really into England Dan and John Ford Coley. But wait! He's not dead, but rather kept alive with some experimental tech that would have eventually had to have been tested on humans anyway. The problem is, at the very beginning, that whole extraneous monkey murder sequence, that the chip that causes that is still a problem. And this big former scientist behemoth of a problem, because the man of science is now a blunt force hammer of crushing and such. So he's a killing machine, but he can still feel that which humans call love for his old lady. And he can talk to her through synthesizers, which is kind of cool. But basically everybody else in this movie is trying to get their murder on, except for Pam Grier, because she's a classy mercenary, and she indulges in industrial hands-on mayhem. Also, Maury Chaykin from The Adjuster is in this, and he is just as incredible as Pam Grier is, but for very different reasons. So, pretty much everyone involved in the proceedings dies, but the martyred scientist lady takes her kid to the Air and Space Museum, where there's an exhibit about the tech and how it got humanity to Mars. So it's kind of a mixed message, because basically they wanted a Terminator ripoff, but instead kind of predicted some of Robocop as well. So the Vindicator is the Lucky Pierre in this particular ripoff daisy chain.
That's an amazing synopsis. Oh my god, I'm dying here. That's so good. Gray, what did you think of The Vindicator? I don't think you'd seen this one either.
I had not, and that was way more thought given to a synopsis than it deserved. Yeah, here we go. So The Vindicator. So I pride myself on being a fair and sometimes very nice reviewer of our movies here, and I always find something to like in the movies we watch, and The Vindicator will be no different. But I will admit, it was a struggle. I found myself watching the movie, and occasionally my eyes would cross, kind of like looking at a Magic Eye poster, kind of fuzzing over and watching through the movie, hoping to find a different movie on the other side in a different dimension. And then they'd snap back occasionally when something fun or interesting would happen. Like, most of the time Pam Grier was on the screen. Or the fabulous death of our horrible doctor at the end when he chokes to death in cyborg amniotic fluid, or things like that. But there are things that are truly impressive, like being a full year and a half before Robocop, being the first time that I can think of a storyline involving a sleazy corporate tech bro killing one of his underlings and then using his corpse to test out a new piece of technology, in this case a robotic suit, cyborg suit, which is very much like Robocop. But that's pretty much where the similarities end. I mean, it's kind of more a Frankenstein story, a lot more a Frankenstein story. Hence I believe the later video title was Frankenstein 88, like the alternate video title, which that makes a lot more sense.
I think it was the original title for the film.
Oh, was that the original? Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I believe
so.
They call him Frankenstein. Like, I mean, in the credits, he's billed.
Yeah, they say it throughout. Yeah.
Well, that was one of my. I was like, come on, man, come on, Doc, come on, Alex. He's like, it's called. We want to keep this under wraps so secrecy's of the utmost importance. We're calling it Project Frankenstein. And I'm like, that's really secrecy's and you're calling it Project Frankenstein? Really? That's truly impressive. But then, he doesn't do he does some very slow vindicating, I guess. Some very slow, boring vindicating. There are things that, like, I'm not going to get down on the Stan Winston suit. That's, like, one of the best things to like in this movie, this low-budget movie. The suit looks great. And, if you're going to cast an actor who you only see their eyes, he's got soulful eyes. That works. Again, Pam Grier, if you have your badass bitch mercenary, that's great. But just like all the other characters, even when she finds out that, like, she's been had, she doesn't just, like... Why doesn't she just, like, wipe out Andrew and just like take what she's owed from him? She's just like, nah, okay, well, I'm still on that. I don't know, nothing makes sense. Even she is like, I'm still gonna be a horrible person. Like, I did have some fun with Alex as this weird sort of mashup of like James Woods and Neil Breen, with like an oddly like voiceover sounding James Woods voice. I mean, not James, James Spader voice. He was kind of fun. He was definitely, I'm glad when he died, but this was the movie that I will go on record. I disliked this movie more than Howard the Duck. This is the worst movie I've had to watch so far for the podcast.
All right.
I have complicated Howard the Duck feelings. What this movie has going for it, honestly, is its Canadianness is a source of joy for me, and sometimes it's the vowels, sometimes it's character actors, sometimes it's the locations, but with this, I mean, it was just, there's something about, in the late 80s, when all the good syndicated horror genre shows, like, Friday the 13th, the series, and season 1 of War of the Worlds, and Monsters and stuff, they all posited this great thing where you don't even know you're doing it, but you start associating Canadian vowels with like magical possibilities and like the supernatural, and just like, oh, you hear that and you're just like, this is where magic things happen, you know, and it's so it's like there's a possibility that comes to the sound of Canadianness that I find really intriguing, but like honestly, this movie sucks. And I watched
baby.
I watched this movie twice because when you first signed me up for this episode, I was like, okay, I'll watch The Vindicator. And I was just like, yeah, I'm fine with this. And then like a couple of days ago, I was just like, I don't remember The Vindicator at all. Like all I remember is like the vaguely sexualized car crushing sequence where Maury Chaykin gets killed. And like that's the best scene in the whole film. Because well, you know, it's like, you know, Canadian sexy car crash things. That's a point of weakness for me. But also because Maury Chaykin is bringing he's bringing different energy to this than anyone else in the film, and it's like why he and Pam Grier are what make it worth watching, I think. But yeah, so I watched it a second time, and I was just like, I cannot believe I'm fucking watching The Vindicator again, because it's just I don't like. I like the fact that there's like a aha, I've trapped you in my pit scene. That's kind of nice. That doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like it's interesting because like it's. Like to me the most interesting thing about it is that they obviously were just like Frankenstein is a public domain thing and we can make this a Terminator ripoff, and then inadvertently just predicted like stuff that's gonna happen in Robocop. So it's literally it's literally part of like a chain of ripoffs that like stretch off into infinity on both sides, and that's honestly the most interesting thing about it. Like I hate that it's so hard to find for people because I want everyone to... Every movie has somebody who loves it more than any other movie. And I don't want to deprive whoever loves The Vindicator out there from seeing it, but at the same time, The Vindicator's not available. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll contribute a few cents to that GoFundMe. You know, it's... I sound awful. I'm an awful person, but
no, it's fine. When A and I finished watching this is the first time, and she's watched most of the movies for all the podcasts with me. Mm-hmm. We were like, this movie is terrible, and we haven't said that about any of the other movies.
You know
Don't feel bad.
What's really terrible, though, is it's not so bad it's good.
Right.
And that's the thing. It's kind of so middle of the road that it's bad. There's good stuff in it, like you mentioned, the Stan Winston suit, you know, some of the actors in it, like Pam Grier and whatnot.
Maury Chaykin
has a couple of action scenes, and... You know, it's like little moments. It has some drama to it. You can almost tell that they tried to make a good movie, but yeah, it certainly hasn't aged well. The interesting thing, my relationship with this film is interesting because I saw it when I was a kid. I saw it when it came out, so in my dad's video store, and I actually loved this movie when I was a kid because if it had a cyborg in it, I was down for it. Now, granted, I loved Megaforce when I was a kid. I also laughed my ass off at Megaforce when I was a kid. Don't get me wrong, I knew it was really bad. This one I like just, it's a cyborg, so I liked Eliminators too, and that's not a good film either. So don't take childhood Brad's opinion of movies too seriously. But yeah, this film, it certainly has not aged well, and no one seems to give a shit about it because you can't find it anywhere. I think there was a DVD that you could get, and it had like The Stepfather and this on it. So at least you got The Stepfather.
Yeah.
So
that is a great consolation prize.
Yes. So you can really cleanse that palate after watching this film. I looked up the director, Jean-Claude Lord. He did another film which I'd seen called Visiting Hours, which I was familiar with. My dad had that in his shop. But what really excited me is he did the sequel to Eddie and the Cruisers. The sequel no one in their fucking right mind needed, wanted, asked for, or anything.
To Eddie and the Cruisers.
Yes, he did that sequel, so it still amazes me to this day. I mean, there's a few things I like about this movie. I kind of like the sewer sequence, honestly. We haven't really talked about that much. And like you mentioned, when he falls into the pit and stuff, I liked. The kid actor, there is actually a scene that is so bad, I actually think it's good. The kid that meets him in the junkyard is so incredibly terrible. Like, everything that comes out of his mouth is so awful that I was kind of cracking up throughout that whole sequence. That is actually so bad that it's good. But yeah, it's middle of the road all the way through. But yeah, there's just a lot of like little similarities. Like, I guess Pam Grier is like Red in this, but she is, as great as Pam Grier is, she's anywhere near the level of the performance or the character that Red is in Robocop. But yeah, there's a lot of similarities, and I remember even thinking that as a kid, because I think I saw The Vindicator first in my dad's shop. Robocop came out shortly after, and I was like, oh yeah, it's kind of like The Vindicator, but way frickin' better on every front. But yeah, the museum ending is hysterically bad, though. It is one of the cheesiest things, and you're right. What is the message? What are they trying to say there at the end of this film? It's it's a lost, underseen film, but I think it is one of those, you could probably not see this. You'd be fine.
I wish that Maury Chaykin from The Vindicator and Miguel Ferrer from Robocop could have, like, teamed up in just, like, a sleazy corporate coke dude movie. You won't believe what kind of sci-fi shenanigans they're getting into this time.
Dude.
Because they're great. I mean, and it's like, it's two very different sleazy corporate vibes.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. I think
Yeah.
that, and also, you know, you just want to see character actors, like, cut loose and do well in these. But, like a Tucker and Dale versus Evil, but for Maury Chaykin and Miguel Ferrer. And sadly, both of them are no longer with us, but God, wouldn't that have been incredible?
Yes. The spin-off movie we never got. Oh, I'm going to say that. Buddy tech bros. Well, folks, if you would like to watch The Vindicator, you can on YouTube. It's also available on the Internet Archive, which has a widescreen version of it. But to my knowledge, it's never been on Blu-ray, probably for good reason. But as we'd mentioned, you can find a DVD out there that includes the much better Stepfather as a double bill with it. All right. Well, from an unstoppable cyborg out for vengeance to a dark journey through the world of the occult, it's time to contact the spirits of Witchboard.
David? Are you here? Can you hear me?
It began at a party. It was only a game.
David, will you return to the living one day? Bullshit. Careful, Jim. You're upsetting David. David, are you all right?
Yeah, he's all right. He's just a little dead, that's all.
Shut up, Jim!
What's he gonna do, haunt me?
Hello, Linda. This is Brandon. I just realized I left my Ouija there the other night. I'm having some friends over Sunday and they want to use it. Besides, I want to contact David and see if he's calmed down yet.
David, are you here? Are you still angry at Jim? David, where are you?
Man, don't tell me you bought that crap with Brandon and that board.
Oh, please.
Boy, David, you sure know how to hold a grudge, don't you? David?
I want to bring a medium by your apartment as soon as possible to exorcise the spirit.
Okay, let's talk to some ghosts.
David, where are you?
You!
Did you cause that accident at the site? David, don't lie to me.
When someone uses a Ouija alone, like Linda, she's very susceptible to the spirits she contacts. And the wrong spirit will take advantage of this. Pretty soon, all she wants to do is use the board. And once that's done, he's able to possess her.
Linda has made contact.
Linda, unlock the door!
David is here, and he's playing for real. It isn't a game anymore. Witchboard. Don't play it alone.
All right. Gray, can you synopsize Witchboard for our audience?
Yes, indeed. Witchboard is the frustrating, heartbreaking story of love lost, reconciled, then lost again between Jim Morar and Brandon Sinclair, and it also happens to feature a Ouija board. No. Okay, no, I'm sure all of us will get into that later.
Oh, we damn well will. We damn well will.
Oh my gosh. If that's the synopsis, I'm going to be so happy. That's the greatest thing ever.
Okay, we'll reset and do the straight version. The always glorious Tawny Katane starts us off as Linda Brewster, a student stuck between two men and a portal to the spirit world. Jim is a misunderstood loudmouth construction worker. Brandon is a family vineyard-moneyed law school Lothario. They both have big problems with one another, mainly Linda, as we learn that they both blame each other for the downfall of their close friendship. At a party where Brandon holds court with a Ouija board, Linda is introduced to the world of summoning ghosts, specifically that of a little boy named David. Jim doesn't believe in David. He makes fun, causing David to freak out and leave. Ouija board flies everywhere. That pisses Brandon off, and he storms off, leaving the Ouija board behind. The next day, Linda uses Brandon's board to contact David, who tells her where her lost engagement ring is. Jim goes off to work at a construction site where his friend Lloyd is killed by a slab of falling sheetrock. Jim is questioned by a cop at Lloyd's funeral. Linda contacts David through the board about the accident to see if he had anything to do with it. David said he doesn't. Linda begins to fall under what is known as progressive entrapment of the Ouija board, where a spirit terrorizes a human being to the point where they've used the board so much that they become a portal themselves. Brandon ends up bringing over a wonderful psychic medium named Zarabeth, who I can't say enough good about, to do a seance to try and exorcise David the spirit from the board. That seems to be a success until Zarabeth returns home to research what happened, and she's thrown out of the window and onto a sundial, defenestration and a wonderful stabbing death, impaling death at the same time. Brandon hears about her death and suspects that David has killed her, so he leaves to find out some more info. Jim witnesses Linda violently throwing herself against the wall, admits her to a hospital. Jim and Brandon decide to investigate all of this themselves, and they go to the town to try and find where David, the actual real David, to try and find where he was buried, where he was from. And what they end up finding is that they go to a lake and do a seance, and what they find is that David was actually never in control of the board at all, but it was a different spirit named Carlos Malfeitor. Malfeitor causes a bunch of barrels to topple over on Jim and Brandon. It knocks Jim out. Malfeitor kills Brandon with an axe, and basically they find out that Malfeitor was an axe murderer who lived in the same house as that Jim and Linda now live in. So Jim returns home, finds that Linda is possessed by Malfeitor. They have a sort of showdown, and then Malfeitor, inside Linda, tries to convince Jim that he is actually the portal, and the only way to shut off the portal is if he kills himself. Instead, he shoots up the Ouija board. She pushes him out the window, but he survives. And blah, blah, blah. Everything's happy. They get married. And therefore, Jim and Brandon don't get to have their happy reconciliation after all. But, such is life.
Look, all I'm going to say about that, and you know I'm speaking from the heart, even if the film is not trying to imply that they're exes, which they 100% are, when Brandon gets killed, Jim fucking cries, and he never did that before for anybody.
Yep.
Yes, and it is said multiple times in the movie. You don't love her. You don't, and even Brandon says he specifically says I've never seen him cry in my life. He says that on the phone to Linda,
and she was just like,
yeah.
Okay, that's not something weird to hear from somebody who is talking about my boyfriend. You know, right. It's just that's the thing about this film. And I love Tawny Katane. Like, this movie and the Whitesnake video happening at the same time. I mean, like, that's like kids today.
It was great for this film that was happening. It made a lot of money because that was happening.
But kids today, I'm trying to think of a good equivalent for that. It's sort of like when Beyonce drops an album with no warning whatsoever, and it takes over the culture. That is what it was like during the Tawny Katane-assance. in 1986, 1987. And it was just, she's great. She's so good in this.
Yes.
Her wig acting is amazing. Every outfit she wears in this movie should have its own Barbie.
Yep.
And, like, especially, like, when she's fully taken over by Malfador and she's, like, in the tuxedo with the hatchet. I'm just like, this is a look that more people need to be resurrecting because, like, it's real good. Like, a lady in a tuxedo is a good look.
Always.
And then
that's one of my favorite moments is because Malfador, when you actually see him in the dream sequence where he cuts her head off, when you see Malfador as a physical being, he's got the suit on. So when she is channeling him, she wears it's what she wore to the funeral.
Yeah.
That's what she wore to Lloyd's funeral. She wears her funeral suit to look more like him. That's such a great moment. And she's just impeccable with the axe. And
I love Lloyd and Mike. Like, Jim's boys, Lloyd and Mike, we don't get characters like that in movies anymore, who are just sort of like, they're there as moral support and interesting coloration. Like, they could have been Dave and Chainsaw with just a slight veering into, like, something else.
Absolutely.
But, like, it's that kind of vibe, and I love them for that. But also, like, this movie, watching this movie again, I was just like, this is, you know what I haven't watched in a long time that I need to get the complete and total Tawny Katane experience, and that's Bachelor Party. And you know what? You know what movie is exactly as transphobic as you're afraid it is? Bachelor Party. There's still great stuff in it, but oh god, they're just like, this things were different then.
It would not surprise me.
I'm actually excited to rewatch, and I have it scheduled at some point on our show. Is the Perils of Gwendolyn?
Oh, in the Land of the Yik Yak.
Tawny Katane is in. We'll be covering that when we do Raiders of the Lost Ark sort of ripoffs.
Right on. Raiders of the Lost Archetype. Oh
yes. Oh, got a title. Got a new title. Oh my. Wow, yeah. Speaking of outfits, Zarabeth. You want a doll of Tawny Katane? I want a doll of Zarabeth, like, on my shelf. She's my new hero, and I loved everything about Zarabeth. She's so awesome. Her hair, her glasses, her tasseled jacket, somewhere between goth and new wave and punk, all rolled into one. She's fantastic.
A little proto Katie Lang energy too. Like,
totally.
Zarabeth is the 80s. All of them. Everything of the 80s, Zarabeth is.
It's combined into one character. Yes. It's amazing.
I don't believe in mediums, but y'all, if I ever start slinging pea soup or anything, make it Zarabeth.
Yep.
She's the absolute best. Because, I mean, bless Zelda Rubinstein, but I can't handle Zelda Rubinstein. Like, she's too much. Like, give me Zarabeth. She's about my speed. Zelda Rubinstein would kick my ass, but Zarabeth I can handle.
Gray, had you watched this in a while? What did you think of it? I hadn't watched it in ages, and I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it.
I believe the last time I watched it was with Jason. That would have been a couple years ago. Yeah. Was that Jason? Yeah, over at our house. Yeah. So it hadn't been that long ago, and so I watch this relatively regularly, every several years or so. So yeah, I'm fairly familiar with it. There is no downside to this movie for me. It's one of those weird things that I saw as a kid, and actually Jim, my filmmaking partner, and this was one of our favorite movies when we were in our late tweens, early teens. And now thinking about that, I'm like, what a weird one. There's exciting moments, and there's some good kills and stuff, but it's like a pretty slow character piece, particularly between Brandon, and even if you take away the, queer subtext and stuff, it's still like it's almost kind of like, because I also think about how I really liked Amadeus when I was a kid too. Maybe it's a thing with like two guys having weird issues with each other that I was into. Like, I don't know. I don't know. But there's something about it, and it works. particularly Brandon and Jim, like there's that moment where they know that Linda is in danger. It's on the landing. It's the moment where they first sort of have a reconciliation because Linda's in danger, and it's really emotional. And rewatching that now, I was like, damn, this is really good. That's why I was invested, even as like back then. I was like, there's intensity here. This is a serious movie. Like you kind of think about Witchboard, it's this campy. It's like, no, it is very, very sincere. Like even
that's what took me by surprise was how much went into the characters and the development of the relationships between the characters, and that it wasn't just a Freddy Krueger ripoff, which that was what was in vogue at this point in horror. And I remember the marketing for this. That's how they marketed the film. There was a lot of Malfeitor and all that kind of stuff in the marketing, but that's not at all really at the heart of this film, the relationship between these three different characters. It's well done. It's surprisingly well written and well shot, and it's fun. It's got a fun sensibility about it too. I know that it was originally entitled Ouija, before they changed it to the better title of Witchboard. But it's interesting, like, to compare this to the modern Ouija film. There's certainly a lot of similarities there as well, but this is like a way better movie. I mean, it's, just in every, and it's a way more like mature movie. I mean, that movie's just like, here's some attractive teens, and they have a haunted witchboard, and there was a ghost in the, it's from the previous tenants of the house that she's in, et cetera, et cetera. Much like Witchboard, but this is just such a better movie in I think every possible way. I don't know if y'all had a chance to see Ouija before watching this, but what were y'all's thoughts in comparison between that film and this film?
Well, I'm gonna jump in here because I'm a Leo, and sometimes the only way to defeat stereotypes are to fulfill them. But the modern Ouija film is garbage. But the sequel, which is actually the prequel, is amazing.
Yes.
And I would, if I was doing a talking board double feature, it would be Witchboard and Ouija: Origin of Evil. Because I mean, like, you don't have to preach the gospel of Mike Flanagan right now, because he's doing something really interesting. And that was like the first time when he's like, oh, well, he's taking a chicken shit previous film and giving us a chicken salad prequel. So it's yeah. It really showed off how talented he was. I was already a fan of his. I'd seen Absentia, and I was like, this little low-budget horror film is so well written and so well acted, and it cost nothing to make. And I was just like, who is this guy? He's something that he made Oculus, and then, of course, Ouija. I hadn't actually seen the original Ouija when I saw Ouija 2. I watched it because I was a Flanagan fan already. And then I went back later and watched Ouija, and I was like, this is garbage. It's amazing he was able to do such an effective prequel to that film. But
and I actually cheated because I saw Ouija Origins first, and chose to, even upon recording this podcast, chose to never watch Ouija. I don't need to do that to myself. And I felt like I didn't need to. So
I braved it because I couldn't remember almost anything about it except that I didn't like it, and I felt like, okay, I need to watch it at least to make the comparison. But yeah, I mean, they basically have like the same kind of premise more or less, but completely different characters. It doesn't even hold a candle to Witchboard. I will say there was one thing when I was a kid with Witchboard that confused the living shit out of me. It's this movie called Witch Trap, which was made by the same director that also features Malfeitor in it, but is not a sequel to Witchboard. And actually, I remember the box in my dad's shop. It actually said that on the back of the box. It said, not a sequel to Witchboard. Because it was really confusing because they had the exact same fonts, same director. But it's, I don't know if it's in the same universe because I didn't get a chance to rewatch Witch Trap. But there is actually a sequel the same director did called Witchboard 2. Yeah. That was done, I think, in the early 90s, which I haven't seen. And I think there was a third one as well after that. But it's interesting, I found out they're remaking this film. And none other than our beloved Chuck Russell, a la Dream Warriors, Blob, he's the one doing it. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm somewhat intrigued by that aspect, but I think that's set to come out this year. So might be a lot more folks talking about Witchboard in the very near future.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, I ran across like kind of the trailer for that when doing research for this. But yeah, I really was surprised by how good this film was. How it was more of a character piece and a relationship piece than a here's a boogeyman a la Freddy Krueger type film. But I will say that the Malfeitor, who doesn't really, it doesn't seem like you actually see him until about an hour into the film.
Yeah.
He's scary as fuck looking.
Absolutely.
I mean, when he's got that axe, that shot, it's a really great jump scare.
It is the best, it is the scariest moment in the movie, is that axe shot.
Yes.
It's the giant scissors shot from Exorcist 3, It's the shot of the movie, certainly. Yeah.
That and her, Azarabeth, dying on the sundial, I think. And that was one of the big images that really stayed in my head from this film, was I remembered it had death by sundial, which is just so unique in a lot of ways. And it couldn't have happened to a more amazing character. But yeah, this director is interesting too, because he did Night of the Demons right after this, which I loved the shit out of that film. And then Linnea Quigley then went on to Witch Trap after Night of the Demons. She has a small kind of role in that film as well. What are some other thoughts?
Here's a few things. Thing one, Brandon's home looks like it's a condo, apartment, and house all at the same time. It's a lot. We only see that one room, and you're just like, this is a way complicated space to live in. It's it is so semiotically packed with all of these you could literally do a freeze frame of that and put it in front of a grad school semiotics class and just be like, what is this room telling us? And you would get the most amazing responses. You'd get entire doctoral theses out of that. Just that one shot of the door of their apartment with letter and number on there, and you're just like, what a great location to do an anthology of just there's something unspeakable in every apartment in this building. But the other thing. There's this moment when Brandon is very I think Linda's been using my Ouija, and he says it in a very Oni Wheeler's 1972 country hit, I think old John's been shucking my corn kind of way. I love it, and I was just like, yeah, I think you could absolutely do a sad country jam or a techno thing with that sample of just I think Linda's been using my Ouija.
Oh my God,
and then we're all about the same age. Did either of y'all encounter Stephen Nichols as Patch on Days of Our Lives? Because my great-grandma loved Days of Our Lives.
My mom watched Days of Our Lives religiously. She taped them all on beta every day and would come home from, teaching elementary school to watching episode. I actually got into Days of Our Lives for a bit. It was just a bonding with my mom, and with the weirdest plot ever. So that show. But yeah, yes, I do remember. I remember him from that show as well.
Yeah, I do too. But specifically, it was Anne Elizabeth. She was even more than Tawny Katane. She was watching it for him because she watched Days of Our Lives as a kid. So she was watching this movie for him.
That's adorable. Yeah. Here's one other thing. Bump in the Night is kind of a banger, and you can't find that song online anywhere.
Steel Breeze.
I looked, but I will also say,
really, they have 5 albums. I looked them up, and I was like, oh, was this a one-off they made for the movie? And I was like, they have 5 studio albums. I was like, what the hell?
That's what it did though. Was it put me on the searching for hair metal theme songs to horror movies I loved. And the absolute banger, and I don't know how recently y'all have watched this film, or if you've given the time to soak in its theme song, Brave New Love by Alien from the Blob 88. Holy shit.
Oh, I've seen I watched the Blob 88 regularly. Yes, of course.
That theme song at the end credits, it's great. It's they're Finnish, it's symphonic metal. but it's poppy and
listen to
hair
this.
metal. Like it's like simultaneously made for like Volvos on the edge of a fjord and strip clubs. It's magnificent. Just wonderful. Also, I feel like Progressive Entrapment is the name of a made-for-streaming drama that's now on its 3rd season, and nobody's really watching anymore, so they're getting real crazy with it. But just like, coming this season on Progressive Entrapment.
Progressive Entrapment.
And it's like one of those, it defaults to the English dub, and you have to like go and like watch it in the original like Indonesian to like really get the vibe.
I also thought no amount of progressive entrapment would entice Tawny Katane to root around in the garbage in her satin robe for a cardboard Ouija board. There's a scene with her digging through the trash in her satin, beautiful
She's
robe.
completely hooked, yeah.
Yeah, she's totally hooked.
I also love the friend with the sunglasses who gets it on the construction site. I think he's entirely 80 yard and he never is not wearing sunglasses.
Oh, Lloyd,
Yes.
Lloyd?
Even when he is working on a construction site, which, you know, I'm sure violates many safety regulations. Hence his death.
Lloyd is great because he is representative of an archetype that exists. And like, you know, Brad, you're out there now. Gray, you lived there for a while. There is a very specifically LA archetype that Lloyd represents, which is slutty surfer John Cusack. And you don't get that often enough. And that is an archetype. Like, filmmakers, hear my voice. Get you a slutty surfer John Cusack in your film, because that is something that is that we are underserved by as a community.
Agreed.
We got to bring back that archetype, so.
Agreed, and it's a big loss when you drop sheetrock on him.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to see him go. It was like, no.
Oh, I know. I know. It's
Yeah.
kind of I was like, am I going to like this film now that he's dead? I was not sure, so it was still kind of revving up.
I would love to see like outtakes from that party sequence where it's just Lloyd and Mike like riffing on whatever's happening in the party. Because they're like I really like
absolutely.
their vibe. And I like the fact that Jim was just like, oh, thank God, I've got 2 other friends here who I know have my back. That's a good feeling.
What is your favorite Linda outfit? And so what is the best outfit to summon the dead by? Because they are distinct. She has a different outfit every time she's using the Ouija board.
Her best look, I mean, they're all great, but they really know to build to her in the Malphaedor suit with the axe. That's just incredible. And the hat. That's that.
The hat.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, I'm a sucker for a beautiful woman in a tie and stuff. Big Marlene Dietrich fan. So yeah, I'd definitely go for that.
Malphaedor funeral suit went for
her hair. Also is like kind of crazy and frizzy.
What's her best?
She's got the extra mascara on. Yeah,
sometimes it's a wig, and sometimes it's real, and sometimes it's wig on real, and it's like, yeah,
you're right.
Like I would it definitely, like, if Shout Factory or whatever does a 4K of this, track down the costumers and makeup artists on this film, because like it's seriously every look is great. I mean, like Tawny and her costume designer, they obviously had a great time on the weekends. I'm envisioning sports cars and cocaine, be responsible if you use things, kids. Okay. But I mean, just like those outfits and that makeup is so good that I'm just like, Tawny took care of the makeup department. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
And also, it's just, I mean, like, it's a great look. They're just sort of like, okay, well, emotionally, we're going to give it to the 2 dudes, but look-wise, you get all of that. It's sort of like we're going to balance it out.
And she's good in this. I feel like this is her best role, honestly, from the films that I've seen her in. She's quite good. I think she's pretty strong in this film. Certainly better than The Perils of Gwendolyn. Although that movie's a blast, Ray. Wait till
I've never seen The Perils of Gwendolyn. I know of it by reputation.
I haven't either.
Oh my gosh, we may have to have you back, Jason.
I know of it by reputation, and the fact that it's Justa Yakin, the guy who directed the original Emmanuel.
Yes.
But the Sylvia Crystal 2M Emmanuel's, like my Emmanuel area of expertise is the Laura Gemser Emmanuel Netta films, or Emmanuel as they say in the Italian dubs, but good stuff. That box set, oh my god. It's eternal. It's like every couple weeks I'm just like, I'm gonna watch an Emmanuel Netta film, and I'm just like, there's still 30,000 to go. There's not, but it seems a little. It's an extensive box set.
Here's a fun bit of trivia from my dad's video store. He started his video store with like, I don't know, 10, 15 movies, and he numbered them, and number 1 was Emmanuel. That's the number. That's yes. I always remember that. That is the number 1 film. Like he brought like 10 movies at the beginning, and that was the one always labeled number 1. So he was like this movie rents like hotcakes. He was like he couldn't keep that on the shelf. He was like, that was one of the best purchases I ever made for that video store. Emmanuel.
I'll tell you, I like the fact that it's kind of a multi-format horror film. Like, you could watch it with, like, your horror movie friends. If you had, like, a girlfriend or boyfriend, you could watch it with them. It's a multifaceted potential rental. Like, that, and or, like, if it was on cable or something, it was reliable. Like, there are a lot of films that their entire reputation is just built on the fact that they, like, aired nonstop on HBO or Cinemax or something. But there are also films that, they aired a lot on cable, but they're reliable. And Witchboard is a reliable film.
Yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It is the Big Trouble in Little China of horror.
Also,
from the late 80s.
Also, and this is just a shameless little, like brag on it, but just the cop character who's always talking about like musicians that make him angry. I'm sorry, magicians that make him angry.
Magicians.
I actually got to see Siegfried and Roy in 1991, and it was fucking incredible.
Nice.
I was just like, they speak of that, and I'm just like, oh, that's right. They're both dead now, and like they had retired for a while after the mauling. So it was like, So, but I was just like, when I hear a reference to Siegfried and Roy, I'm just like, I actually got to see them. It's like my grandparents talking about seeing Elvis.
Jealous. Yeah,
I'm extremely jealous. Yes, and I do, and also that detective, I loved that so much that like his whole plan was like annoying you into confessing to murder. It's like, do you like magic? I'm gonna juggle in the hospital. It's like, I'm gonna annoy you until you confess to murder.
Opposite of Columbo.
Also, a closing thought is I loved in the scene in the Windmill Hotel, as if anybody needed any proof that Jim and Brandon love each other. Like, none of these guys, they've been going on this road trip to find this proof, and they haven't checked on Linda. She's in the hospital. She's not doing well. And they just have been there reconciling and joking and having big emotions. And that's when you realize no one else in this movie actually really likes these guys except themselves. Like, they only like each other. And it's like, well, yeah, of course. Because you guys are...
Because they're messes.
The only people that get along with you are each other. And this scene really shows it. But then it's the perfect little ding on it is, you don't happen to have an extra toothbrush, do you? Because Linda used Jim's toothbrush to fish around in the sink to get her wedding ring out earlier in the movie. It's like an extra little, like... Yeah, I used your toothbrush to find my wedding ring when David told me where it was. Yeah. I just loved that.
They're both messes. And the thing about it that's really interesting, like, I'm just taking the, like, past gay relationship as given. This isn't a hypothetical anymore.
Of course.
But the thing beyond that that's really interesting to me is that, like, Linda is a grad school student. She's a smart woman. But does she not... I mean, obviously she has to have known that they had a past together, and she is, like, this common thing. You would just think that, like, at some point she would just be like, maybe it's me. I just, like... There's a problem with queer cinema a lot of times in which, like, a gay relationship is foregrounded or, like, built on, like, wasting a woman's time. Like, even some of the greats are like that, where you're just like, come on, like, don't waste this woman's time. She's, like, a nice person. I feel like there's even, like, if this film were actually from Linda's point of view, I think it would be wild because, like, not only is she like the node or the union between these two like weird ass dudes who can't get their shit together? But she's part of like a love square, because she's got the two gays who've got their killings, and then you've got like the child spirit who's just like, she's the pretty lady who wants to talk to me, and she's got like Big Daddy axe murderer as well. So it's like she's got 4 different dudes, and they're all wasting her time, and nobody's gonna give Linda a happy ending.
You are wow.
Oh, wow.
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 That Jason, that's amazing. That is a really good.
That's why I don't get paid the big bucks.
Well, I think that's an amazing place to end our discussion on Witchboard. All right, of the films we watched this month, which one was your favorite? Jason, did you have a favorite?
I mean, I love 3 of these movies, like capital L, love them, but I guess if I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be Eyes of Fire, just because it means the most. It's the one that, like, just kicks an audience's soul's ass. I mean, it's Soul Survivor. I love that too. I'd have to say, like, Eyes of Fire is the best, and then Soul Survivor and Witchboard are like not too far behind, like honorably sharing second place. And then the Vindicator. I don't hate the Vindicator. Like, I try not to be a hater, but I don't feel strongly about it in any way.
What about you, Gray?
Eyes of Fire, beyond a shadow of a doubt. The others don't even come close. I obviously love Witchboard passionately. And Soul Survivor was a huge surprise. Never seen it. Absolutely loved it. It's a near masterpiece. But, I'm the king of, like, 2 answers. There's no 2 answers this time. It's Eyes of Fire. I feel like it just lives in my veins at all times. It's everything I could ever want. Eyes of Fire all the way.
Nice. Funny, I'm gonna go against the grain. Soul Survivor for me, just because I saw it when I was a kid. It scared the living shit out of me, and now I kind of have a different relationship with the film. I really admire the chutzpah of the filmmaking and stuff that went behind it, and it still really holds up. It's fucking scary as hell. Loved Eyes of Fire. That's close, kind of close second. Witchboard was also a big surprise, having not seen it for 20 plus years. But yeah, poor Vindicator did not hold up so well. Although I loved it when I was a kid, so there's still a little part of me that kind of like is like, oh, robot man. But yeah, it's not so great. It hasn't aged as well. But yeah, Soul Survivor, it's just my kind of horror, to be honest with you. Although I do, just put that out there, I love folk horror almost as much. But yeah, Soul Survivor, it had a real impact on me as a kid. So yeah, that one means a lot to me. All right, amazing. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. Please feel free to come back anytime. We loved your commentary on all these films. You were an absolute blast to have on. Oh my gosh. I think that's the most laughing I've had for one of our podcasts yet. All right, so next month we will be discussing raunchy teen comedy films from the 80s that are named after food items. We will discuss Meatballs from 1979, Hot Dog the Movie from 1983, and Hamburger the Motion Picture from 1986. Joining us to discuss these fast food films will be my good friend and keyboardist for the band The Apples in Stereo, John Ferguson. So John and I, we were really good friends in high school, and he's actually someone that used to rent movies from my dad's video store. So he'll be a unique guest to have on, probably one of a kind, who is actually someone that used to go to my dad's video store. So I'll be sure to definitely ask some questions specifically about that experience while he's on. So he's also an ardent cinephile and stuff. He's hosted screenings of films in Lexington, Kentucky on several occasions. And he's great. He's got a lot of film knowledge to bring as well. So really excited to have him on. This has got to be one of the dumbest themes that I've come up with yet for an episode. But I'm glad to take a break from horror, sci-fi, drama, we're actually just doing really dumb comedies next month. So, Gray, have you seen any of the films we're discussing next month?
Not a one. Not
Excellent.
not even Meatballs. This is like the Enter the Kosugi for raunchy teenage sex comedy episodes. So yeah.
Well, we'll see how things hold up. I haven't seen any of those three films, since they came out. I remember laughing hysterically at Meatballs and Hot Dog, and laughing a bit at Hamburger. The movie, but that's the one I remember the least. But I remember one really, really funny moment from that film. So I'm excited to revisit those. All right. Well, once again, thank you, Jason, so much for joining us. You have been an absolute pleasure to talk to. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Really great to get your insights on these little scene gems. And I really encourage everybody to go out there and find at least 3 of these films, and to watch them. So they're worth checking out. All right, and folks, you can read Jason's movie reviews online in the arts and culture section at NashvilleScene.com. Please check them out. Jason always has some of the greatest insights on old films and new films that are coming out in the theater, and they're absolutely wonderful. Yes. So please take time to rate us on wherever you're streaming your podcast. Don't forget to follow us as well. That helps us get found by the algorithm. So until next time, please be kind as we rewind.